After the pedo dad's conviction, I moved with the kids to the grandparents' house, hoping for help. It turned toxic fast guilt trips, canceled support, and inappropriate comments. I fled, but they fought back with court-ordered visits, despite the kids' distress. It's like we're stuck in a nightmare. This situation is occurring with a family that I am close to. I will refer to them only vaguely as I discuss this. I apologize in advance if this is excessively lengthy, but I have omitted a significant amount of detail from what I am sharing. Ultimately, this all began years ago when the mother discovered that her then partner, not married, whom I will refer to as pedo, had been sexually abusing her oldest daughter. He was promptly arrested, convicted of multiple charges, and sentenced to prison. They had 3 children together, while the oldest daughter was not his biological child, though he referred to her as a stepchild. Following his conviction, the paternal grandparents offered the mother a house near their location that she could rent from them. This seemingly kind gesture quickly transformed into a manipulative bid for control, a claim supported by much evidence. I firmly believe that they, along with their son, were narcissistic abusers towards the mother. This house was situated hours away from her hometown. Suddenly finding herself a single mother with her life turned upside down, she viewed this as her opportunity to own a home. There was talk of a rent-to-own arrangement. Initially, the grandparents acted as though they would be the mother's support system, assuring her that they could help with the children once she moved. However, this support was rarely forthcoming. She intended to find employment, but after relocating, the retired grandparents withdrew their agreement to care for the children while she worked, contrary to what she had been led to believe. With 3 of the children in school during the day, the youngest still needed supervision while the mother worked. Had she not moved away, she would have had access to childcare and a supportive network. She secured only a very part-time job, able to work just 1 day a week, which was all the childcare they could provide. Throughout this ordeal, she faced reprimands and condescension from both the grandparents and the incarcerated father for not securing a better job. They would often say things like, "Single mothers manage it all the time," among other narcissistic remarks. Occasionally, when the mother had scheduled work and the grandparents were meant to babysit, they would cancel to engage in leisure activities. This left her compelled to either miss work or take her child along. They chose to spend time with all their grandchildren perhaps once a month during the summer and even less during the academic year. On at least one of these occasions, the grandparents insisted that the children speak to their father in prison, getting upset when they were unwilling. When invited on a field trip with one of the kids, the grandmother declined, stating she was uninterested in their activities. They were not particularly involved grandparents and sympathized with their son in prison, even expressing hope that the children could establish a trusting relationship with him. On one occasion, the grandfather repeatedly called one of the children sexy, continuing even after the mother asked him to stop, halting only when the grandmother intervened. During an unexpected overnight hospital stay for a serious issue involving the youngest child, the grandparents agreed to look after the other children while the mother stayed at the hospital. However, while they were at the house, they became upset with the oldest child, the sexual abuse victim, which resulted in her experiencing a severe panic attack. The grandmother, for some unknown reason, yelled on the phone with their son in prison that the oldest needed her ass kicked. She was around 12 years old at this time. Red flags began to arise. The mother regretted the move and expressed a desire to return home. Secretly, she began searching for other housing options to remove her family from the situation. Eventually, she found a suitable home close to her hometown, where her family and friends lived. She provided the grandparents with her 30-day notice, since they were technically her landlords. The grandparents reacted with immediate anger and announced they would be conducting home inspections. As the mother and her family started moving their belongings out, they spent less and less time at the rented house. On one occasion, upon returning to gather additional items, the mother discovered the door had pieces of tape discreetly applied at the bottom, likely to allow the grandparents to monitor whether she had been home. The grandfather sent her furious text messages, accusing her of changing the locks, which was false and can be proven, and declaring that she had really messed up now, among other aggressive messages. A camera was also installed directly facing the front door of the rented house. As it was situated on a neighbor's property, the grandparents could deny any involvement in it. I should also note that shortly after the mother submitted her 30-day notice, the grandparents posted eviction notices on the house, claiming she was hoarding and had damaged the property. The hoarding allegation was entirely unfounded, and the damage consisted of something related to a hook screwed into a wall. The mother was aware of her rights, and the matter did not advance to eviction court as they never pursued it further. Now, having finally relocated back home, she believed the ordeal was over and her family had escaped a toxic situation. However, the grandparents proceeded to file for grandparent visitation. This is extremely difficult to obtain in my state. A guardian ad litem, essentially a lawyer representing the children's best interests, and expected to remain neutral towards both the mother and the grandparents, was appointed. The guardian ad litem spoke to the mother just once and never consulted the children. To the shock and dismay of those who care about these children, the visitation was approved, despite evidence showing that the grandparents had not maintained a healthy relationship with the children, which is necessary for such a ruling, and the grandparents' character was called into question. The children weren't pleased about the visits, often expressing their reluctance to go and how they dislike being there during the visits. Months down the line, the guardian ad litem finally spoke to one child and somehow concluded that she enjoyed the visits, despite her earlier expressions of dislike. During these visits, the grandparents made comments in front of the kids such as, "Is she stupid?" referring to the mother, recounting facts they had learned about the family's situation, and claiming they had spies who informed them about the family's circumstances. They criticized the household for having too many pets and suggested that their home probably stinks because of this. On another occasion, one of the grandparents began to cry and told the children that their mother was putting bad things in their heads about them, which is false. She never brings up adult issues with her children or comments on them. Overall, the grandparents' behavior during these visits is inappropriate and peculiar. The guardian ad litem maintained that this arrangement serves the children's best interests, while also stating in court that he was, on the grandparents' side, clearly no longer impartial. He even remarked that the grandparents would lose him if they violated the conditions set forth, an odd statement given that he is meant to advocate for the children rather than the grandparents. The situation has escalated significantly. Overnight visits to the grandparents' home have now been authorized, which will place the children 2 hours away from their mother. The youngest child has a serious medical condition, and the child's doctor advised that the grandparents are not adequately qualified to care for this child, making an overnight visit inadvisable. The judge ignored the doctor's recommendation. The newly authorized overnight visits coincide with the father, a pedophile, initiating his own case for video visitation with the kids. The mother and children have ceased all contact with him, and the children have never mentioned him. As it stands, the grandparents are prohibited from mentioning the pedophile father to the children. He is currently incarcerated and will remain so for many years. Throughout this ordeal, the mother has retained a lawyer, though they appear to be acting more as a legal messenger, rather than actively advocating for her and her family's situation. It raises the question of whether a lawyer's role is limited to merely conveying messages in these circumstances. In summary, the pedophile father is imprisoned. The mother and her 4 children were offered a rental home by the paternal grandparents, subsequently revealed to be highly sympathetic to their pedophile son and eager to keep the children in his life, under the pretext of providing support, which turned toxic and manipulative on the grandparents' part. The mother and her family moved back home, prompting the paternal grandparents to react hostilely, leading to a complicated and biased grandparent visitation court case. You believe I am overreacting or viewing the situation through a distorted lens. I feel that the grandparents are primarily seeking control over the children and the family, retaliating against the mother for placing the pedophile in prison, with the ultimate aim of reintegrating the children into the life of the pedophile father. All 3, the grandparents and their son, exhibit extreme narcissism. I sense we have reached a deadlock in our efforts to protect these children. None of the court proceedings seem logical. Despite the overwhelming proof and evidence provided, visitation should never have been granted. It appears that neither the judge nor the guardian ad litem truly prioritize the children's welfare and best interests.